Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining us today. In the last few days, a lovely, beautiful sovereign lady who has been part of the freedom and the truth movement, although in a very sort of background position, I would say, has unfortunately and sadly passed. And she was a great friend of Tess Lawrie, who's joining me now to talk about the very lovely, who I met a couple of times in real life and interviewed on this show, Ruth Skölmli. Tess, thank you for joining me in this little tribute that we've put together.
Well, Richard, thank you so much for inviting me to speak about Ruth. You know, she really introduced me and World Council for Health to the word sovereignty. Before I met Ruth, I used to think, a sovereign was a gold coin or something related to the royal family. And I never really realized that we were sovereign and what that meant. It means self-determination. And Ruth explained, although it was hard to believe, that, we were all actually sovereigns, kings and queens of our own territory, our territory being our own bodies, our minds, and our spirits. So, I can't really overstate what a contribution she's made to the health freedom movement, because we now recognize that health and sovereignty are absolutely interlinked. You cannot achieve optimal health without being sovereign and having being able to self-determine and make your own choices. So this is a little one of our slides that I use when explaining to people what the World Council for Health is about. So among our slides, we have this slide, we promote sovereignty. And what this means, based on what we learned from Ruth, is that we manage ourselves and solve our own problems. We don't take orders from others, we govern ourselves. We're our own land and our own territory. We act on our conscience and know right from wrong, and we live in harmony with nature. And that being sovereign is how we create, thrive, and evolve. Ruth's influence also extends to our Better Way Charter, because we have 7 principles of the Better Way, and the first principle is we act in honor and we do no harm. So I encourage people to look at that on the website. There's 7 principles, but the first one is we act in honor and do no harm. And of course, Ruth was the first person to say, we do our best to live by this. We all make mistakes, and when we make them, we correct them. But we've set out to do no harm to others or our environment, and notably on Ruth's fiery with her resoluteness on our fundamental human rights. We have at the very end of the charter as a footnote that we do not tolerate the violation of inalienable rights and freedoms. Now, many people say we've got there, with courage we do not tolerate the violation of inalienable rights and freedoms, and we don't tolerate profit, power, and influence coming before the well-being of people and the planet. Now, so many people have said, well, how do you enforce that? And, how do you expect to enforce it? It's not as, but, that's exactly the position we have to take. We don't need to be afraid. It's about standing up for truth and justice and actually, putting your ethics up front, and really not putting the consequences before the ethics. And Ruth was, you might think, well, she must have been really, such a strong, a brave person. Well, she was a strong, brave person, but, she was terrified of public speaking, and, and actually quite timid in herself, but she did not compromise on the truth and on justice. And she was a real warrior, a gentle warrior for justice. So if a bailiff was at the door, or if she had to go, she would go to court to defend an unlawful fine. She was nervous as anything,
Yes.
Her heart would be fluttering, but she would do it, and she would do it on her own, and very bravely and with conviction, So she's set such a great example for us all. You don't have to a brave person is really someone who has the courage of their convictions. And she was really super brave.
She was very lovely to talk to when I interviewed her last year in 2023. There are so many people who are very extremely passionate and vocal about sovereignty, freedom, and the truth movement, and very often that can come over a little bit aggressive or arrogant. But what Ruth was not, and she put things in the most simplest and easiest terms, and was very gentle. As we're going to play in the full interview that I did with her in a minute, and people will be able to see that for themselves. And so it was lovely to see other people, other than what you do often see on YouTube or on the other channels, these people who have the knowledge and the truth to put out there, but sometimes it can come over a bit harshly, whereas she was extremely gentle and made you really believe that what she was saying had substance.
She really wanted to share with people and empower them, and she put together this wonderful course. It's got 10 modules, 10 minute, they're sort of 10-minute modules. So it's really accessible. And it's on her, she has a website called sovereignnaturalalempowerment.com, I think it is.
I'll put the link in the description.
Yeah, but she really explains it so clearly, and that was all she wanted to do. So she's left this amazing legacy in terms of the course as well, and I strongly encourage people to do it. It's really for everybody, children, men and women. Everybody should do it and become sovereign.
Absolutely, and we are sovereign people, and we need to make sure that we are in our own sovereign standing. Shall we go and watch the video now? I'll play it in, and ladies and gentlemen, you can see what a lovely lady that Ruth Skölmli was. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me in another of my interview series. Today we're going to be talking about common law, and you've heard me talk about this, and I'm learning all the time. And I realised I needed to speak to somebody who knew a hell of a lot more and has spent a long time exploring what common law is and what the other laws that we think we understand is, the acts and statutes and legalese and all of that, is actually about. So let's bring on my guest today, which is Ruth Skölmli. Ruth, it's very nice to have you on the show. Sorry about I practiced your name there. It's not an English name, and I'm not very good when it's a different country. Where's Skölmli from?
That's Norwegian, Richard.
Norwegian. Oh yes, that's right.
My husband's fault.
Fantastic. But it's a lovely name. It's a lovely name. So Ruth, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for coming and agreeing to talk to me about common law and the hierarchy of law as well, because we all think that we are under the spell of what the government legislates and tells us that we have to do. But as I've been exploring in my videos, it seems to be that's not really the case.
No, Richard, I just mentioned to you earlier that I did go to law school, and I spent quite a few years there. And what I've realised in the last couple of years is what we're taught at law school is not law at all. We're taught about legislation. We're taught about statutes. We believe that that's all, the most important thing about law. But actually, the law is very simple, and you don't need to go to law school for 3 years. You can learn it in 5 minutes. So, I mean, I can teach you now if you like.
Well, please do. I am now your pupil.
Right. So the law, instead of millions of pieces of legislation, statutes, orders, regulations, rules, all of that kind of thing, is very simple. It's just we cause no harm, no loss, no injury. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yes.
We have to act responsibly and proportionately in all the circumstances. So responsibly and proportionately, that can give you lawful excuse to cause harm, because there may be circumstances where you have to. For example, a doctor may need to cause harm to fix somebody if it's an emergency. Or if a house is burning down, you might have to break through the door to get people out. So that's your lawful excuse to cause harm. But otherwise, we cause no harm, no loss, no injury. We are honourable in our contracts. And we have to know that our rights end where another person's begins. So I can easily teach your rights as well. That's very simple too. And knowing the law and knowing your rights gives you a clarity of mind, removes all the clouds and the befuddlement that we're living under, and gives clarity of mind so that we can act with confidence and courage, because we know what we're doing and we know we're doing the right thing.
Well, I'd love to know what my rights are then, having now got my degree in law, in the law. Thank you very much, Ruth. What are our rights, our inalienable rights, presumably?
Well, I pronounce it inalienable just to make it even more confusing.
Okay,
but a lot of people
I struggled to say the first version, so I struggle sometimes.
Some people say inalienable rights.
Inalienable. That was it. Yes.
I say inalienable, but
inalienable.
I won't get into that right now. It doesn't.
Is that
matter.
because of the lean part of it? Yeah,
exactly.
That's what I've heard. That's a technical term, as it were.
Yeah.
Or there's etymology behind it, I suppose.
Yes, and it just helps me to remember, and doesn't make us sound like aliens.
Yes,
anyway,
no, that's true. Yes.
But I know what you mean. So there's inalienable rights, and there's also all the other rights that you have. So your inalienable rights, I just see it as those that you need to, first of all, exist, because they are part of natural law. That's how we exist. Then how we survive, how we stay alive, and also how we thrive. So we need water, we need food, we need clean air to breathe. We need to be able to protect ourselves, to self-defense. We need shelter, from the elements and all those sorts of things. Bodily autonomy, so that no one can touch us if we don't want them to. So these are inalienable rights. And then everything else, all the other rights, is everything that's not a wrong.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
So the law is to cause no harm, no loss, no injury. And that's a wrong to do that. So if you're not doing any of those things, everything else is your right. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So
that's very empowering, isn't it?
Certainly empowering. Empowering. Gets rid of all of the clouds in your mind of what's the right, what's wrong. What can I do to protect myself? What can't I do to protect myself? Too much force, too little force. If you need to protect yourself, you have to be able to be confident that you can do what you need to do and not worry about reasonable force and all those idiosyncrasies that come with the legislation. So that's what confuses us. Things that we see on the media confuse us. Our education system confuses us. But all we need to know is what is the law, what are our rights, and we can do anything that we want to do within that.
So it's by the fact that it is so simple that's especially in days like today where everything is complicated, we have this natural feeling, or maybe it's not natural, but we've this tendency to think it can't be that easy, that things are, you have to go to law school surely to go for 3 or 4 years to understand all this stuff so that you can, work it all out. But you've just put that over in a couple of minutes, and there we go. You could teach that to a child. They understand that. They're going to grow up the rest of their lives. They can choose to do no harm if they wish, and then if they do some harm, there are obviously consequences, but they would soon learn, oh, actually, it's probably better just to, I've got so many rights, I've got so much freedom, I've got so many things I can do. What an amazing thing.
And what an amazing world we live in when it's like that.
Exactly, because nobody's damaging the world or making us restricted and paying huge taxes and keeping us down. So tell me,
you become very creative. You use your creativity, and that's how we thrive. But our creativity is completely, just this complete lid on it.
Yes, it's stifled.
We're so scared to move.
Which is, this is the thing. So, I've been talking about elements of this, not with huge knowledge about it. But as you start talking about it, it percolates, or it's been percolating my brain, and you start to think, actually, yes, no, I am empowered by this. But then you see the restrictions, the council tax thing comes in, a parking ticket comes in, you're told that you can't go down here, there's a stop sign here, all the sort of machinations of government start to sort of compound you, and you go, oh, but nobody's going to believe me if I say, but these are my rights, or you can't do this to me. So how do we combat the very fixed, very rigid world that we find ourselves in?
Well, at the moment, we're kind of focused on, for the right reasons. I mean, we're really focused on the WHO, what they're up to, the World Economic Forum, the elite, all of these things that are going on, big things going on around us, and we want to stop that. But it's the same kind of thing with all the things going on around us locally. That's where we have our power. When we get into this, what I call a sovereign state of mind, clear mind, clarity of mind, so that we know what the law and our rights are, we must hold, responsibility comes with that power. So we must hold people to account who are around us. That's all we can actually do. There's no point wasting our time writing letters to people who we'll never meet. Deal with the people who are around you. That's my advice anyway, and what I try to do. Hold them to account when they are committing a wrong. Doesn't matter how small it is. If they're asking you to wear a mask, they're making a claim in a way that you must wear a mask because you have to protect other people, or it's for your own protection. Well, make them prove that claim. If they're claiming that, they have to prove that claim. Otherwise, because that's your inalienable right to breathe fresh air. So they're trying to take that away from you, so make them prove it. Don't just let them get away with it, even if it's a shopkeeper and you think, oh, I can't be bothered to go to that shop, then I'll just go to another one. No, hold them to account and stop them from doing it. And when they are stopped, it's a domino effect. You have the small domino. I don't know if you've ever seen that image where there's a tiny domino that knocks over a bigger and a bigger and a bigger one. And at the end, it knocks over a giant domino. That's what we have to kind of envisage when we're doing our notices or writing a letter to people or asking someone verbally to please, prove your claim and don't do that. We are that small domino, and we're going to knock over the great big dominoes when we do that.
And I suppose when you knock over the first domino, that's the biggest point of effort, isn't it? Because the rest are going by the inertia of that initial push. And if that push is just enough, you get to the tipping point, and then it just carries on, and you no longer having to do the pushing. It's just that the results are amazing as a result of that first push. Yeah. And how do you push back against people? You'll say, for example, they'll say, well, you've got to wear a mask, and you'll say, well, that's a claim, and prove it. And they say, well, the government told us, or it's on the BBC, or scientists have proved, all this sort of stuff. How do you get over that challenge, that you're challenged back, where you go, because a lot of people do find confrontation quite difficult.
Well, ironically, this is another part of I do courses, short and day courses. And that's another part of it, is that we have to fight for peace. This is all about breach of our peace, by the way. This is all a trespass. Everything's a trespass upon us. And it's trespass that breaches your peace. And we are entitled to live in peace. That's another inalienable right. So these are all trespasses and breaches of our peace. So ironically, we have to fight for peace. That's what we have to do. And if we don't get into confrontation and we don't get into conflict, which we're taught to not do, there's a good reason for that. People don't want us to, because we'll solve all the world's problems if we do that.
Yes.
Because if you let a small thing go, that can escalate eventually into war. That's how big it can become.
As we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. So when you are dealing with your people who are in front of you, it's you and them. It's not you against a corporation or anyone they work for. And if they're making the claim, they are responsible for making that claim, and you have to hold them responsible. So it is individual to individual. I, Karen-Ruth, will be holding Richard, to account if you ask me to wear a mask. Nobody else, just you. And that's how you deal with that. And if they say that it's the government telling you to do this, they have to do their own due diligence if they are reinforcing what they are being asked to do. You don't just follow orders. It's not an excuse to follow orders. So they have to do their own due diligence. And if they're carrying on and asking you to do this and that, then they are responsible for their actions. You're responsible for your own acts and omissions in life. And so that's where it comes down to.
Do you find, though, that, I mean, although you've just told me all of this, and I'm very much on the same wavelength, that you find that people on your courses, or when you do this in the real world, as it were, that people find this very difficult, because of the indoctrination that we've had for years and years and years. Our entire lived experience has been indoctrinated, and so this sense of liberty or freedom rather is quite difficult to grasp for people, even though it's ours and it's a simple concept.
Very much so, yes. But generally the people who are coming to the courses, they are halfway there already because they realize that something's wrong.
Yes.
So they're the easy ones to work with because they want to be able to do something about it. It's the others that are more difficult. We don't want to judge people. We've been taught not to. We don't want to confront, and we don't want to conflict. You hear so much about, I hate confrontation. You hear that all the time. Well, we have to do, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? We're going to leave it, even if we think, oh, well, the army are there ultimately to help us. Well, why should it be a man or a woman's job in the army? You know, they're only people like we are. So we should do our bit.
So it's quite interesting, because in some ways you're saying that although there are these government bodies that are dictating stuff, we don't have to deal with them particularly, unless, of course, it's, you know, someone from the government who's actually come to the door or is there in front of us. But ultimately they are just another living person who is giving you an instruction. Yes. And but you don't have to necessarily deal with the huge bureaucracy. You're dealing with your neighbours and friends and people that you encounter in an everyday life, which makes it seem less what's the word I'm looking for? You know, it's less of a problem to do than if less of a challenge, because
it's manageable.
It's manageable. There you go. I knew there was a word out there.
It's manageable, and that's on your doorstep. So you might have a few days where you don't have any encounters, but then you might have a day where you think, oh gosh, that's too much in one day. But we have to just do what we can. And Richard, nature requires balance. So this is why we're in chaos, because people aren't doing enough to correct the wrongs. So in nature, if there's a wrong, there has to be a right. That's equity. So we have to we have to do our bit to correct the wrongs by just doing a right. Even if you feel like you're getting nowhere, you're putting a right into nature, and that will help to balance everything out. So the more of us doing it,
yes,
you know, we will eventually balance, and that's where we're getting to now. This message that I'm trying to give, that William keeps giving, and didn't you have Edward Fitzgerald on as well?
I did, yeah.
Okay, he's also, you know, there's many of us now doing the same message, and it's getting across. People are starting to hear it now. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask. So, if we go back to the common law, where does that originate from?
Well, this is another confusion, because when you go to law school, you're taught that common law is case law. Well, there's an element of common law in the case law, that it's still judge-made law. That's a man or woman who's kind of part of the government. Although it's a separate branch, the judiciary, they are making that law by interpreting legislation towards the facts of the case. So that's another misconception about what common law is. So it depends what we're actually talking about with common law. Now, I see common law as law of the land that's derived from natural law, from nature. And it's how people interact with each other That's what common law is built up from. That's our social contract. And also, in different parts of the world and different lands, you have customs and traditions. So to me, the common law, that when I mention common law, it's common law of the land, which encompasses the social contract derived from natural law, together with our customs and traditions. So, for example, I'm in Devon here, and we have cream and jam on our scones. I'm making a trivial point here now. And in Cornwall,
you're making me hungry though now.
Sorry,
no,
it is lunchtime. In Cornwall, the jam and the cream go on the other way.
Yes.
So, right, that's a custom tradition kind of thing.
Yes.
So we all have our own different bits and pieces, and that's what makes us unique and a bit more interesting in our lands. That's what the common law is to me, and many other people that try to give this message out now. It's not the case law precedent that is made by a man or a woman in a courtroom.
That is one size fits everybody.
Yes.
Because as you just said, in Devon you're doing your jam and cream one way, and the Cornish are deciding, well, that's all right for you and you're welcome to do that, but we do it this way because that's our tradition and custom. It's not a diktat from a government saying cream and jam must go this way, which effectively what the laws are saying. So how is it that we have these statutes and acts that we all obey? I was going to say religiously there, but it's kind of religious, isn't it?
Yeah,
we obey these things, fearing the consequences, and there are consequences given to us if we don't.
Well, another thing we weren't taught at law school is the thing that William Keats mentions very much, and that's our constitution. That we have a very strong constitution. It's made out of several documents. I have a couple of slides which if I can share my screen. I don't need to do it just at this second.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'll do it before we.
No, that's all right. I may have to fiddle with the controls to do that, but we'll do it. It's fine.
Well, we can try. I'm not very good at this technical stuff either. So I'm not saying you're not good. I'm sure you are.
I don't. I just press buttons and see what happens.
So the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and various other documents, they tell us that we can suffer no fines or forfeitures without trial by jury of our peers, and we cannot be prejudiced in any way. And we're not taught that. That's kind of glossed over, even at law school. So
right, isn't that weird? Even at law school, as potential barristers, lawyers, solicitors, and all of that. So that must. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm just thinking. So that anybody going to a lawyer or a barrister or whatever with a case and is saying, "But I have this thing called common law. We should have trial by jury. We have the Constitution." I guess a mist must go over their head, thinking, "Oh, you're just talking mythological nonsense from their perspective." Yeah.
It's exactly what happens. And I think that's why we have a little problem in the magistrates' courts and things like that, because they just think when we are going in there and trying to challenge them that we're talking absolutely rubbish. And, obviously I have some solicitor friends. They believe that common law is case law, that it has no power because we're not getting to that level of understanding, and they don't. Why would they want to know? That's the end of their beliefs in what they've been doing for all of those years and what they've invested into.
Yes.
So it's extremely difficult for them.
And their financial reward, of course.
I suppose so. I mean, obviously there's a few who've realised and they're trying to speak out as well, but you really are up against it because it's a gigantic system. And the legal system and the legislation is what holds everything and facilitates everything that's happened to us over the last 3 years. You think about it, facilitates all the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry. It facilitates the fear that we have and the control over us. It's facilitated, the Coronavirus Act, and you can do this and you can do that. That system has facilitated everything. It's very powerful.
So how do we combat that? Because, if you don't obey the statutes and the acts, you start getting fines, you start getting summonses, which is an invitation to go and to the magistrates' court to basically plead your case and then end up paying the fine under whatever circumstances you can beg the magistrate to permit you, I suppose. And yet that's wrong.
what is wrong. I think my advice would be, because you can come a massive cropper, believe me, I've learnt it's very hard to stand there in your confidence and get your message across. So you have to start quite small, maybe start with a parking fine and see how you go, or the TV license. Do something like that that's a little bit easier to deal with before you start going in with council tax, because the council tax, which is, you're not obliged to pay it, but they will make it extremely difficult for you to get away with that. And I've been into court and faced the magistrates with that one. It's extremely difficult, but we just have to keep doing it. Just keep doing it.
And just using that as an example, which I know is a juggernaut of a thing. Am I right in thinking that the council is a corporation and that they've effectively posted through your letterbox an invoice for something and saying, please will you pay us? But there's no contract. You've not agreed to it. You've not said, actually, yeah, that's a good idea. Quite like that. I can have my bins collected. There's the fire brigade if my house comes on fire or gets on fire, and the police and, the street lights and what have you. But you've not agreed with them or negotiated and said, well, actually, those street lights, could I have them a bit dimmer outside my house? And I don't want the LED ones, and I'd rather not have 5G. And I'm not really happy with the sort of wages that you're paying at this great big building. So there seems to be, if you were doing a contract with a body that was going to take your bins and provide the fire, there would be a lot of negotiation going on that you would do. But they just post something through your letterbox with the expectation that you're just going to cough up at a sum that they've decided that you have no agreement to, and you just start paying it. But there's no contract, and I understand there's sort of 4 pillars of contract law that has not been agreed to at all.
No, and so there's no meeting of the minds. There's no full disclosure. There's no signature, and there's nobody signed anything. And without a contract, you can have no obligation. For every obligation that you have, there must be a contract in place. It doesn't matter what kind of obligation it is, council tax or a policeman asking you to do something. Where's your contract? You are not obliged to listen to or do anything. Think about your rights. No one can make you do anything unless you want to, and that would be your agreement, which becomes a contract. Everything's about
if a policeman was to stop you, just to stop you because, I don't know, a light was out on your car, or you went 2 miles an hour over and they said, stop here. I was under the belief that you would be able to turn around to him and say, very nice to meet you, hello, but where's the crime? You've prevented me from going on my travelling in my convenience and my conveyance, but where's the crime? And they said, well, your tail light's out, or that you're going faster than the designated area. But if there's no harm to another living person, there is no actual crime. You might sort of take into consideration, well, thank you for the advice about the light. I'll make amends in my own time. Thank you very much. But that you could be fined for these things would be a completely different agreement. And if you were to say, yeah, okay, I will consent with you, or I will contract with you to pay you some money, then that's different. You have to have a contract for that to happen, but you might not want to pay for something like that.
No one can demand money from you without a contract, because you have no obligation without a contract. And with a light being out, for example, it might be reasonable and proportionate for you to have that light fixed while you're driving down the road, so that everyone can see you, know when you're going to brake or whatever like that. So yes, you must go and get that fixed. And as you say, it would be reasonable for the police officer. Well, there's a difference between a
constable. Yeah.
So the constable would say to you, that's fair enough, go and get it fixed, have a nice day.
Yes.
And take your word for it. The officer would try to fine you. It's the same person, but one of them's acting outside of their oath and the other one's acting within their oath. to protect and serve people, keep the peace, and do whatever they need to do to help us. The officer is more of a revenue generating or gathering sort of employee, and they'll do everything they can to fine you. So he wouldn't take your word for it and give you a fine anyway, but the constable would understand that it was an honest mistake and that you're going to get it fixed. So the speed, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on, do the speed one.
Well, the speeding, I've got a few of these now. I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and I have become a bit of a, I used to just do everything by the book, and now, no, not so much anymore.
You're a bit of a rebel, are you?
I'm getting there. Just kind of testing the system so that I can help other people.
Absolutely. And it gives you authority as well, doesn't it? If you're testing the system and you've done it. I've got a friend of mine who's constantly telling me, says, well, I'm out the system. I'm not in it anymore. I've done it. I've been there. And that confidence grows the more you do this, presumably. So, I interrupted about the speeding.
Well, the speeding, remind me to tell you about my clamp before we finish. Okay.
Yes, I will.
So the speeding, you know the law now. You have, you've caused no harm, no loss, no injury to anybody. You have no contract with anyone. So, and you know that the Bill of Rights and other constitutional documents tell you that there can be no fines and no forfeitures, and you cannot be prejudiced without before you've been convicted at the trial by a jury of your peers. So how can this man or woman standing in front of you in fancy dress, they always have to have some fancy dress on, including the judges in the courtrooms, they all have to wear these outfits so that we ironically believe them. It's a bit of a stage show.
It's all theatre, isn't it?
It's all theatre. Of course they don't know that they're doing that. I do believe people believe they're doing everything for the right reason.
Yes.
So it's not a personal thing. It's just education, trying to educate. So how can they fine you for doing a couple of, you didn't hurt anyone. So what actually was the harm that you caused? But it doesn't always work. And, I'm in court in a couple of months' time. It was supposed to be the 19th of May, but they've just announced to me that they're moving that date, where I'm going to try and challenge this. So I don't know how I'll get on, but I'm trying to build up my knowledge by testing the system, and I will be in front of, apparently I'm getting a full trial, which is not a trial by jury. I've tried to get that, but I'm going to get a 3-panel magistrates and potentially a district judge. So that will be very interesting. See how I get on.
And does that sort of, are you nervous about that?
No, not at all. I've been terrified all my life of, first of all, speaking in public, and all my nerves, everything's gone. I've never been as confident I'm not saying I am every single day, but most of the time I feel like I've never felt before. So it's wonderful.
And that's, I mean, this is the thing, because people, I think, watching this, some people will have a vague notion of it because they've been watching what I've been saying, and I've been exploring this and testing the reaction and seeing the comments and what have you. But some people will be watching this for the very first time, of course, or they've been cautiously thinking, I think that Vobes bloke's a bit mad, and they could well be right, of course, on that note. And so some people will be going, can life be that good? Can it really be true? Tell us about your clamp.
Right. What was the clamp for? I think that was a speeding ticket as well. I didn't go to court because I didn't know better at the time.
Right.
So I had a clamp put on my car 28th of November last year, and it came off on Valentine's Day. So it was there for 70 odd days.
Wow.
And luckily we had 2 cars at the time, so we only have the one now, but
was it clamped on the road somewhere away from where you live?
On my drive, which is also
on your drive,
which is another no, but they don't care. He didn't have a summons, he didn't have a warrant, he didn't have a warrant of control, he didn't have anything he was supposed to have. So I just kept using letters and letters and letters, and got to the point where I was taking them to court. And then overnight, the clamp suddenly disappeared. But in the meantime, because, you have a little bit of fun with it as well, I was charging £500 an hour for that clamp. So the bill, and plus £250,000 for trespass. in the first place, which I'd noticed them before they came to my house. So the bill was over £1 million by that time. So I'm just waiting for them to settle that bill. They haven't done so.
Is that why I'm not talking to you from the Bahamas or somewhere like that?
I wouldn't have my woolies on.
No, absolutely. So what I don't understand is why did they clamp it on your drive? What was the possible reason they would be clamping your vehicle, or your conveyance, I suppose I ought to say, on your own property?
Well, that's a good point, because it's not my own, it's a lease car. So there's two things they did wrong. One, they came on my property and did it. And second, it was the lease car, so it's not even mine. So they took control of somebody else's property. So I've just spent a lot of time writing to them, pointing this out. But again, I'm testing the system. So I'm building up my confidence by doing that. And they kept threatening me to come back and break into my house with a locksmith and all of these kinds of things, which is terrifying. But knowing that you've got the law on your side, just kept cool, kept calm, kept just plugging away at it. And eventually they had to just come back with the tail between their legs and take that off. Even though they were telling me that a judge had allowed them to come to my property, they hadn't. So they will tell you.
Yeah. So what was the real, I mean...
speeding.
Oh, it was a speeding. And because you didn't pay, they thought, we'll clamp your car.
I didn't go to court. So I didn't know any better. I should have gone to court, but I didn't know at that time. That's why I'm going to court next time for the next one. So the fine of, I don't know, 40 or 50 pounds became 800 and something pounds.
Gosh.
And then the I won't name the enforcement agents, they add their bill on, so that becomes over £1,000 for doing 47 in a 40. Well, when it was a dual carriageway and there was nobody else on the road.
Yes, and we've all done. I mean, we've all done. You know, I've done plenty of these sort of tiny little misdemeanors. You're looking up at something, and or someone's talking to you, or whatever it is, or you're being careful of something, and you suddenly realise, oh, I've just, in order to do that, to avert some other danger, I've gone a little bit faster to get round there, and the blooming speed entrapment camera, which is a horrible thing in and of itself, which can cause you a bit of, oh, blimey, there's another blooming camera. We've all done that, we've all done it, and we've all felt it was unfair because there was no, it's not like you were driving dangerously at in a 30 mile an hour going at 80 and just for the kicks, which could of course be dangerous, and then that's not responsible, is it? And it's not reasonable.
No, exactly. And that's the law, you have to act responsibly. And I didn't harm anyone. There was no chance of harming anybody. And I think if I remember where it might have been, there wasn't even any residential area there. So there couldn't be a possibility of anybody walking around either. So very, very, not unfair. It's just against your right. You're allowed to travel, and we're all responsible. I've been driving for 43 years. You can make those judgments yourself. And
I suppose that the very worst really is that somebody would write to you and say, we noticed you went a bit faster than the speed limit, just to let you know that is it's the safest speed to go. And you could just say, oh, okay, thanks very much for the observation. It's not really none of your business, but I'll take it on board. And you can be very polite and honourable about it. But that really is about the limit of what should have happened, really, isn't it? Yeah.
It should be. That would be a reasonable thing to do.
Because if you're using that particular bit of, dual carriageway, and maybe the signage isn't good or whatever it is, you might go, oh, I just didn't... I did that going down to see my son one Christmas, and it was dual carriageway in Southampton, and everyone was going reasonably fast, and they was just going in the pace thinking that this was, it was a safe speed. It was 40 in a 30. And I was probably going about 38, maybe, because I wasn't not trying to go over 40, and I was with the children going down to see my eldest son. And the next thing is like, oh, there's a speed camera. Oh, blimey. And of course, then it came, and you think, okay, if that had just been, by the way, that's a 30, not a 40, you go, oh, okay, fair enough. I'll bear that in mind next time. You would have, but no, there was no harm. There was nobody in the way, and it was well fenced off from the public. But they made money out of it, and you went on, and I went on one of the courses to tell me I was a naughty person for going a little faster than I should have done.
And they probably made a little bit more money out of you for doing that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, they took a day of my life away, as it were, to do the course, as well as paying for it, and intimidating me to make me feel that I was a stupid person. And you know, all those sort of, you know, threats and menaces, which you just don't need in your life. So what do we do though? Because you mentioned writing. And that seems to be now a friend of mine, he's a very much a writer. He likes to introduce himself. He's very honourable, but he's very firm. And he says, and he starts to state what the situation should be and how they have mistreated him. And he's sure it's all going to be sorted out. But he uses the written word, the pen, as the tool to get back at them, because effectively that's what they're doing to you, isn't it, with their notices of penalties and fines and summonses.
Yeah, it can be very difficult to write, especially when you've got a summons, because they are frightening. That's what the design is, to frighten you and make you feel fearful. But if you know the law and what they are and aren't allowed to, that they're acting under legislation that doesn't apply to you. I know I've heard you say that, Richard, that you know about that now. That's a really difficult one to get to grips with, that legislation does not apply to us unless we consent to it. And you can consent by not objecting to it as well. So it's a bit of a minefield. You've got to be careful. And there's also, with driving, there's also the potential contract that you have with your driving license. So there's a lot of minefields with driving, and I would not start your processes of fighting back or trying to test the system with a driving offence, because they are really hard to negotiate, and you do end up in court very quickly.
Yes. So you don't want to get into court too quickly until you're really confident and you've got a knowledge base of how to deal with the legislative process.
Yeah. Starting just by writing, your own words, but just never write anything that you cannot back up. Never make a statement in writing or verbally that you cannot 100% back up with your own proof or evidence. You can ask questions. That's completely different, because asking a question, you're looking for information, and then they have to back up what they say. So try and word it, question like, why have you sort of done what you've just done? But you don't have to write in any template form. You can just write your own words, your own unique way. You don't have to be brilliantly clever or anything like that. I certainly am not. Just what happened and what have they done, and just write that down in your own way. And if you start following templates, that can get to the point where they have an automatic response, because they're seeing this template all the time. Yes. So every time we write in our own way, they have to really think about their response, and it's a bit harder for them. So they can learn to deal with a template, but they can't learn to deal with us as unique individuals. So it's best to use your creativity.
One of the things that I've learnt is that in legislation, in the legal statutes and acts, or in court, there are 12 presumptions of law. And these presumptions mean that they will assume 12 things about you, but they don't tell you what these things are, so you don't know. So as you go into court, unless you rebut them and say, oh, by the way, these 12 presumptions don't actually apply by me, you have then not given a contract. And it seems to be a weird way that they'll say, well, as soon as you step into the court or answer our letters, unless you've actually said no to these things, you've contracted with us. Right. And so, but once you know that very simple thing, and you can say, oh, by the way, I'm rebutting the 12 presumptions of law, which are this, and this. They don't apply to me, by the way. Thank you very much for offering them. Very nice of you. Very kind. Very enticing. But they don't apply to me, because that's not the law. Is that fair? Is that a
That's fair. I think I'm going to be a little bit pedantic here.
please do.
We think there are 12 presumptions, but how do we know there aren't 15 or 20? So we aren't told everything. This is the occult. And by occult, I mean secret, not, what we believe occult is. So I would just say I rebut all presumptions. You may have it out there.
Yes, very good.
Because we don't know how many there might be.
Yeah, so there might, yes. No, I hadn't thought of that. It's very good. I like that.
But it's well worth saying, because if there aren't any, or there are 100, then, it doesn't do any harm to say that.
No, yes, absolutely.
And I don't think all of the judges and magistrates know about them themselves. I think it's until they get to the higher levels that they get more in. I think we're finding this information coming down through, people who've realised it's not good from higher levels, and they're just letting that information filter down. Otherwise, how would we know about it?
Yes. So the more people, obviously, that do this, the more times people, judges and barristers, will see this coming in front of them, which will make them question what they're doing. If they don't believe, it's like one or two doing it. It's like, oh, well, these people are a bit, a bit old-fashioned, a bit mad. They sort of believe in mystical things and all this. What's this natural law rubbish? We know what statutes and acts are. But if loads of people are saying, well, I don't understand, why are so many people believing all this? Well, maybe there is. I'll go and have a look, and then they may educate themselves and go, oh, blimey, didn't realise that. But
exactly what happens with police officers as well. When they come up to you and say, you see that they think they're in charge of you and they have all this power, and they are just stood down, completely stood down, that's going to shock them when they go away and start to think about that. And again, it's not to embarrass or humiliate anybody, it's education and putting right what's wrong. And it's wrong what they're doing. So when they try to impose legislation upon you, me, sovereign woman, you, sovereign man, they're not, it's wrong. So we are educating them and putting the wrong right. That's all this is about. So if they go away and think, gosh, why did that not work? I couldn't do anything with that person, we shouldn't say person. I've said it twice. That individual, it didn't work. Why did it not work? And they go away and think about that, and they're going to stop believing in their boss and think, I need to figure out what just happened to me here, because I don't want to be humiliated like that again. So that's how it works.
So I had a conversation with my son, who's 33 this year, and I was just talking to him about the ULEZ expansion in London and saying that, although I haven't really covered that in my videos, and there's plenty of people doing that sort of thing, I was saying, oh, have you not heard about the protests? And he said, well, not really. But he didn't understand what the problem was. And I was saying, well, it seems to be an immoral law that you're going to charge people. Anyway, the point was, we went on this sort of way and he was sort of shutting down. So I thought I'll try a different tactic with him just to see if I could open his mind in a different way. And so I said, do you agree that we're all born free? And he said, yes. And I said, and if we're born free, then presumably nobody is above the law. Do you think that there is nobody above the law? And he said, yes. So I said, well, how can another person then tell you what you should or shouldn't do? And he said, well, if you take that to its logical conclusion, he said, we'll just have anarchy. And I thought, well, do you know what anarchy really means? And but he just thought that meant everyone would just do whatever they like and there would be terrible disruption. And that's where you sort of go, are you sure? But he was so indoctrinated with, if people do what they like, that we're all going to turn into rapists and murderers and fast drivers. And you think, that's not how society actually works. So that was an interesting thing. So was that a good argument to have? Even if you were arguing with a policeman, you could use the same argument and say, yeah, I respect your costume, which is very nice. And I don't know what theatrical shop you got that from, but it's lovely. But, no man can be above the law. But the policeman obviously thinks, well, I'm enforcing the law. Well, what law are you enforcing?
But perfect arguments. I like the tactics with your son there. And of course, we know that what anarchist really is as I've learned over the last couple of years, it means you have no ruler. And that's what a sovereign is. A sovereign has no ruler. You rule yourself. You can make your own rules, regulations, and laws up for yourself, and this for your land, your territory. And this is my land. I am my land, my territory. I make my own rules up for my territory. This is all ties in with the sovereign state of mind. It's a sovereign state. This is my sovereign state. And you have no ruler. You make your own rules, and of course you stick to the law. You don't cause any harm, loss, or injury to anybody else. And my rights end where somebody else's begin. So where their land starts, so this person individual standing next to me, it's very hard to not say person, they make their own rules up for themselves. So we cannot, step on each other's rights without causing harm.
Now, we mentioned, I wasn't going to go down the person thing, but because you've mentioned it a couple of times and people going, oh, right. I wonder why we shouldn't say person. And this was the start of my understanding of this, because I made a video where I was saying, leave me alone, I'm sovereign, I am a person. And then a very nice gentleman who I have a lot of conversations with called Stuart said, Richard, you're not a person. And I thought, and I said to him, oh, don't be silly, that's just semantics. But it's not just semantics, which I have now since learned.
People argue it both ways. So I try to avoid using person because it always kicks up a bit of an argument. So if you speak to Mark Horn, who is Peacekeepers founder, along with peacekeepers.org.uk.
Yes, I can't remember. I think I'm doing an interview with Mark, so it would be interesting to talk to him about it.
He's amazing, and he has started the Peacekeepers up, and he gives completely free education, tuition on how to be sovereign and how to deal with all of these things that we're talking about. Great website, and I'm glad you're talking to him. He's amazing. I can't remember what I was saying now. Sorry.
Right, okay. People arguing person in different ways.
Then ask him about person, because he's like, we're persons. Get over it. It's just a distraction. But there's also the legal fiction person, which is a state created sort of thing, corporate legal entity, and that's the person can have all of this legislation applied to it because it's not real or alive.
Right. And
it's something that you join to, contracted to by your behavior or by registering with the state. So that's a whole massive argument or belief, which I'm there with that one. It fits a lot of the things that I believe. But a lot of people would also say, just get over it. It's substance, not form. So don't get bogged down with the details of that.
I will ask him about that when I get him on. I mean, it's fascinating because I think people are beginning to sort of get a sense that what we have is not right. Yeah. And at this time, since the pandemic, in particular, has been a moment in which we've seen huge abuse of power. Yes. And people have acquiesced to it because they didn't know any different. But because so many people have acquiesced to it, and because now it seems loads and loads of things are being rolled out that we wouldn't no one's asked for, the 15-minute cities and the net zeros and the digital banks and all of these things, and yet everything's to be coming down at huge speed. And of course we've all got a sense of, well, I say we all got, people in the peace movement and freedom movement, I suppose, have got a sense of where it's coming from beyond government and who's dictating this sort of thing for a globalist agenda. But in a way, I think the pandemic has been, it's been tragic and absolutely dreadful for many, many people. But it's also been a gift because it's focused us on this huge tragedy of what it is and how it was implemented and the subsequent medical interventions and stuff. It's focused a lot of people and waking people up, and it's slow, but it's growing like no other time, I think.
I agree, and I think we needed it to realise how bad things actually are. And if this had been sorted out a year ago and we, got through it, I think that would have been too early. I think, unfortunately, we have to see the horror before the half awakes will, I don't know, what to call that, before they realize that we weren't just mad. This was really happening. Before things get back to a good place again, they have to really see that it really was as bad as we know it is.
Another observation I've started to think about is people always say, but people are sheep and they just do all this. But I think that's an advantage, because where we start to lead and show people the way out, you want everybody else to sort of go, oh. And as they see more and more people go through the door of freedom, or knowing their rights, or understanding the law, and actually being able to challenge it and have a better life and not have the stress and all the nasty penal government legislation on their backs, the sheep, such as the horrible term it is, as people realize, we must follow these people because they obviously know something. So in a way, it's a good thing that a large majority of people will follow, because it will give the movement a snowball effect.
Yeah, and once we all get through the gap in the pen, or whatever it is we're all in, then we can all have a better life at the other side and empower.
Yeah,
I don't want to call people sheep, but
no. I suppose it's just it's a word that's bandied about that people they say they're a sheep and they're asleep, but in a way it's kind of that once people realize that people want something which means something to them, and people follow like convenience, don't they? It's like water. They take the easiest route. Well, as soon as people realize this is the easiest route and it's much more beneficial and it's convenient and it's a good life, the majority of people will follow like sheep. And I appreciate that anybody who thinks that's I've been offensive. I'm not meaning it like that.
I know you're not.
Yeah,
I know. Also, Richard,
but that's a good thing for us.
Just mentioned convenience. As a sovereign being, and how we've become unsovereign, is that we have given up responsibility for our lives to convenience. I know it's not your meaning, wasn't your meaning. We wouldn't have a clue how to get our own food, where to find water, how to build a house, to shelter, how to protect ourselves. We have no clue, because we've handed responsibility and our healthcare. We've handed responsibility for that over.
Yes.
And we have to claim back our responsibility to get control and stop the fear.
Yes.
So that's another thing that was well worth mentioning.
Yeah, because in a way we've become like children, and we've seen big government, big tech, big pharma, big everything as our parents, and we've sort of sidetracked everything to them and said, oh well, the government should sort this out, instead of taking responsibility for ourselves, which is a very simple thing to do, but it's also very powerful, I think. And I've been as I've learned this, I've just felt myself saying it. You just start talking the language and you think, oh, where did this come from? I was never like this before. But you suddenly realize that the power is within, and you can't help yourself. Once you've seen that light, you can't turn back, can you?
No.
Because no, go on, sorry.
Right. I don't know if how much time we've got, but if there's any chance, I've got a couple of slides, my two most powerful slides that I have in my presentation.
We must see those. Sorry, yes.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Let's see if we can get this to work. So I'm going on full screen here, and I share the screen. Oh, blimey, here we go. Now, what do I do here?
You probably need to make me a host or something so that I can share my screen.
Yes. Screen 1, screen 2. No, wait a minute. I've done this once before, and I can't
We're seeing
remember.
all your secrets now, Richard.
All my secrets. There's nothing secret there. It's all a load of old.
Not to worry if you can't.
Yeah, there is a way of. Can you get it onto your screen?
You have to make me host so that I can share my screen.
Right. If it's on your screen, on your.
Oh, I see. Okay, let me see.
unless it's your camera that it might be. Hang on a minute. There's a
share.
Oh, wait a minute. Share. Oh, here we go. I'm sharing my. Oh, yes, here we go. I remember now. How do I change this?
I'm testing you now, aren't I?
You are. No, it's all right. People can always fast forward or just sit here and amuse themselves.
Watching you struggle.
Watching us, yeah. I'm just trying to, and they're going, Richard, you're so that's stop sharing. You are. I'm staring at. Hang on.
You need to make me host or co-host.
I've done it once before, where I just switched, let the other person share the screen, and annotate, remote control, apps, more, chat, security, stop the camera.
What about participants?
Well, oh yeah, here we go. Let's see what that says. Invite, copy, security.
Does security let you let me share my screen? I can't remember how to do it. There will be people going.
Yeah, people will be shouting. What you have to do is, because you see, what people probably don't realise, I'm not recording this within.
Okay, don't worry. It doesn't matter. I can just maybe mention it then, perhaps quickly.
Yes, okay.
It's a shame because one of them.
I've got to get you back on the screen now, because all I can see is. How do I do this? Oh, stop share. There we go. That's done something very strange. Hang on a minute. I'm going to go to me, and multiple advanced sharing. One person, multiple participants can share.
There you
Try
go.
that. Does that work?
It should do. Let's have a look. Right, I can now share my screen. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah. Yes, I'm just trying to get back. Yeah, here we go. Brilliant.
Right. Can you see that now? Let me just put it onto presentation mode and make it a bit bigger. Right. I don't know if can you see the whole screen?
I can
I've got
see most of it.
Okay. Let me see. Oh, gone too far now. It should be enough just to get the gist at least. Hierarchy of law and jurisdiction. This is the hierarchy of how we truly stand in law. And right at the top is natural law. I'll do it very quickly. There's a lot more to this. Underneath that is sovereign man and woman. That's us, as we are. And then we have created laws, the rule of law, which means we're all equal and nobody is above the law. Our constitution and the law of the land, including the common law. We've derived that from natural law, and it has to align with natural law, otherwise it's unlawful. Then we created government to administer the realm on our behalf. But of course, we've taken our eye off the ball, and they have. Every government will write itself into ultimate power if they are left unchecked, and that's exactly what's happened. They create government agents, and then all of those other things at the bottom, that's us as registered contracted beings, taxpayer, occupier, resident, driver, voter, citizen. We all think a citizen's a good thing, but we are diminished status when we are a citizen. That's the creation of the state. Now, the hierarchy of law can only have power from above. There can be no power going up. It can only come down, or authority, I mean. So the highest authority is us on the planet after our creator. And then the government is our creation, so they have no authority over us whatsoever. We only have authority over them. And then the creators of the creations of the state, they are even lower down, and the government can have authority over them if you go into your diminished state. That's a very, very rushed way of explaining that to you.
But you can see, I mean, just looking at that, it makes perfect sense. You've got the creator, whatever, natural law, universal law, which as man or woman, we can't change how the creator or how things have been created.
Absolutely.
Where we can start to work things out is as a sovereign man and woman, and work out, actually, we don't want to hurt each other, we respect each other and all of that. But sometimes it's useful to have some sort of administration just to help things along a bit. So we've created the government and the agents. And it's interesting what you said, we should have the power over the government, but the government seem to think, for whatever reason, power corrupts, of course, that they're in control of us and can dictate everything. And so we have this tyrannical situation. And then the last bit, the government is over the contracted people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we contract with them, then we are bound. We've found ourselves bound within their contract, but we don't have to contract with them.
No. And they create this illusion, excuse me, through legislation, and that's turned the whole hierarchy upside down. And Edward Fitzgerald mentioned that on the program with you. It's completely turned upside down. And they've done it through legislation and the illusion that's created through our, and backed up by our education and media. And I have one more slide.
Yeah, no, please go for it.
It took me a long time to get this one together. This is the sword, a sword, the sword of justice. I've used the sword as the example, and these are all of the legislation, and that does work and enshrines everything I've said about the law and our rights. These are all the different pieces, and people might have to screenshot this. And of course, it's got the Bill of Rights and all of those other kinds of things in there. But everything that William Keats mentions and everything that Edward Fitzgerald mentions and other people, these are all of the constitutional documents are in here. And some of them are very, very recent. We've got the Fraud Act that helps us, the Police Reform Act and the Equality Act, all very recent ones. But the very most powerful thing that we have is this word, and it's no. We just say no. That's the most powerful word in our language. And it's everything I've said to you is backed up in all of these statutes and bills that are written on there. So wow. we've got a lot of stuff there to back us up when we go to court, and then when we're dealing with the people who are trying to enforce things on us. I'll stop sharing now.
It's a fascinating. We'll have to get you back. So you run courses and things, don't you? Do you have a website that I can point people to, or they can find out more?
I have a website. It's very fledgling, and I haven't got a huge amount of time to fix it. But you can get in touch with me through the website. It's sovereignnaturalempowerment.com. sovereignnaturalempowerment.com. I'll put a link in the description. Ruth, thank you so much for talking and spending the afternoon with me. It's been absolutely fascinating and very empowering. Yes. And I'm going to be talking more about this. And of course, more people are waking up to this and realizing this very simple freedom is ours, and very, very powerful. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everything you do, Richard, because you're so calm and very easy to listen to. You're really helping us to get this message across.
Oh, good. That's very kind of you.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Another wonderful interview. Really, really interesting, very exciting and empowering. And if you do check out Ruth's website, as I say, it may only be fledgling, but it will grow, I'm sure. And more power to Ruth and to all of you who are attempting to claim back our freedom and stay within the real law. I'll be back again with another interview very soon. But in the meantime, thank you to Ruth. Sorry about the shenanigans with the screen. And from me, goodbye.